Hello friends, family, and fellow bookworms, welcome back. Today I want to talk about my top 10 most favorite book series that I've ever read in my entire life. Now, note that I said series. I'm just going to be talking about my favorite book series, not my favorite, books singular. There are a lot of other books that I love. Today, I'm only going to be talking about books that either have sequels, prequels, or both. Because there are many other singular books that I like that are not part of a series, like the Bible, the Silmarillion, Dracula, and a whole bunch of others, but today I'm just gonna be talking about my favorite book series. One of my favorite book series is Redwall by Brian Jacques. This here is just the first book that I have. There are actually 22 books in all. I probably own more than half of them, I just can't show them all to you now. So, Redwall, they're very good books written by Brian Jacques. I remember reading these a long time ago. The primary story takes place in a place called Redwall Abbey, and all our characters, as far as I know, there are no humans. All the characters are ferrets, there's badgers, mice, hedgehogs, voles, there's rabbits and stuff. And so, in this first main Redwall book, our main character is Matthias, who is a mouse, and all the creatures in Redwall Abbey look up to their ancestor, Martin the Warrior, who founded Redwall Abbey, and there are also a couple of Redwall books written about Martin the Warrior. All in all, I don't think it really matters that much which order you read them in, so you don't have to read these Redwall books in order. There are 22 of them. There might have actually been more Redwall books had not the author sadly passed away in the year 2011. These are really good books that I remember really enjoying at a very young age, and I love the way they're written, and they feel very archaic as well, and there's just a ton of heroic virtue in these books, and these are just really good books. I would very much recommend them to anyone who's like a fan of Watership Down or the Green Ember. These are fantastic books that I think everyone should read. Right, and then I have here The Wingfeather Saga by Andrew Peterson. I also read these books a while ago. There are 4 books in all. So there's On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness, North or Be Eaten, The Monster in the Hollows, and finally The Warden and the Wolf King. So this is a series of 4 books written by Andrew Peterson that I read a long while ago. So it takes place on a continent known as Skree, and we follow these 3 siblings named Janner, Tink, and Lily. They're the Igby family, so we basically follow the Igby family, but we focus, the story focuses primarily on these 3 siblings. I'm just going to use this one book here to represent the entire series. And they have a mother. Their mother is called Nia, but their father died long ago, and they don't know why. And they live with their mother, Nia, and their grandfather, Poto Helmer. So we basically follow the Igby family in their travels and their adventures as they learn more about their family history. And the main character is Janner, one of those 3 siblings, with Janner, Tink, and Lily. When I first read this, I was struck by how much Janner felt like myself. When I read Janner's thoughts, I feel like I'm reading my own thoughts, because Janner is just such a relatable character, and he thinks very much like me. He reminds me very much like myself in a way. He's just such a relatable character. I felt like I was reading a story about myself when I was reading from Janner's perspective, which I think almost the entire series is full from Janner's perspective. So Janner is just such a relatable character, and this series is just so good. There's so much to it. They have all those heroic themes like the Lord of the Rings do, and Redwall does, and so I really love these books. If you haven't read these books, you need to. Alright, so, third on my list. Oh my goodness, these are heavy books. Next on this list is the 12-volume History of Middle-earth series by J.R.R. Tolkien, edited by Christopher Tolkien. These are very good books, and very heavy books. Whew. I cannot hold these up the entire time. These 12 volumes of the History of Middle-earth are The Book of Lost Tales Part 1, The Book of Lost Tales Part 2, The Lays of Beleriand, The Shaping of Middle-earth, The Lost Road and Other Writings, The Return of the Shadow, The Treason of Isengard, The War of the Ring, Sauron Defeated, Morgoth's Ring, The War of the Jewels, and finally, The Peoples of Middle-earth. So, this incredible 12-volume series, you've heard me talk about this a lot on the channel if you've been here a while. After J.R.R. Tolkien passed away, his son Christopher found a huge mass of manuscripts and papers in his father J.R.R. Tolkien's office, and he thought these are really interesting because they contained a whole bunch of unpublished writings about Middle-earth, and many other unpublished works of his father's, of J.R.R. Tolkien's. So then Christopher Tolkien, J.R.R.'s son, he ended up taking all these manuscripts and editing them, and ended up publishing them, and these are like the Silmarillion and the Children of Húrin, Unfinished Tales, and a whole bunch of others. And among those papers are the History of Middle-earth series. And it's really cool, by the way, how, like, pretty much over 70% of what Tolkien wrote in his lifetime was actually published after his death, which is really fascinating. So the 12-volume History of Middle-earth series is how he wrote the tales that make up the world and how he really developed the world of Middle-earth, and the languages in it. So the first 2 volumes are the Book of Lost Tales, which is some of the earliest writings about Middle-earth. Tolkien wrote these when he was in his early 20s fighting in World War I. So the earliest versions of Middle-earth were written in like 1915, 1916, while J.R.R. Tolkien was fighting in the First World War. And he would scribble down on his notepad these stories that he called the Book of Lost Tales. And the Book of Lost Tales very later on became the stories and legends that make up the Silmarillion, the published Silmarillion today. And the Book of Lost Tales, those Lost Tales are very different from the Silmarillion, but you can really see how they're still those same tales and how they really developed over time. So Christopher Tolkien basically provides earlier drafts of all these works of his father's, and gives helpful commentary, and it really over time shows you how Tolkien developed Middle-earth. It's also really interesting how you can like really see Tolkien's writing process. So the first 5 volumes focus primarily on how Tolkien wrote the earliest forms of what would later become the Silmarillion and the Great Tales of Middle-earth. It also includes the first 4 chapters of a time travel story that Tolkien began, but never actually finished, called The Lost Road. So J.R.R. Tolkien started writing a time travel story, a really fascinating one, by the way. I had a lot of fun reading it, but unfortunately he abandoned it 4 chapters in. And then volumes 6 through 9 of this series focus on how he wrote The Lord of the Rings, which were some of the most fascinating volumes. You read earlier drafts of Lord of the Rings, earlier versions of the story, learn how Frodo's name was originally Bingo, and those ones were just so fascinating. Then the last 3 volumes focus on how J.R.R. Tolkien wrote what now is the published Silmarillion. It also has a couple other previously unpublished writings. Mind you, I haven't really finished this series yet, but I am currently on book 10, Morgoth's Ring. And this series is so fascinating because you can see Tolkien's writing process and how he developed the world of Middle-earth. I highly recommend this to anyone wanting to know more about Middle-earth at all, or like if you're a fan of Lord of the Rings, you can even read volumes 6 through 9 first, if you're not as familiar with like the Silmarillion stuff, and all the legends of the Elder Days told in the Silmarillion. So that is the History of Middle-earth series. Really impressive what Christopher Tolkien did with this series, because like it took him 15 years, I think, to release these 12 volumes, and J.R.R. Tolkien's handwriting was not very easy to interpret. So Christopher Tolkien did a very great job, especially on reading Tolkien's frustrating writing style. I tried reading Tolkien's handwriting once, and it did not work out well. In fact, here, let me show you this in a minute. Here, in The War of the Ring. That is J.R.R. Tolkien's handwriting. And yes, that is written in English. I cannot read any of that. So, yeah, Christopher Tolkien did a fantastic job interpreting his father's confounded handwriting. because honestly, that is terrible. But hey, it's a great story, so we can all forgive him. Handwriting doesn't matter so much as what is being written, right? So that was the History of Middle-earth series. I highly recommend them. And next I have the Flavia de Luce series by Alan Bradley. Now mind you, this is not all of the Flavia de Luce books by any means. This is just the first 4. These are the only ones that I own so far. There are actually 11 of these books, which I need to collect. And I have read all 11 of these books this time. So I'm just going to use this first book to represent the entire series. So this is a genre that I don't usually read from. The Flavia de Luce series is mystery, and I'm not really that into mystery. I hardly ever read mystery. I'm much more into like fantasy and science fiction, as you saw from all the other series on this list. But I was pleasantly surprised by how good these books really were. So, this is fiction, taking place in the summer of 1950. Well, this first book is 1950 to 1952, I think the entire series is. And our main character is Flavia de Luce, an 11-year-old girl who lives in Europe with her 2 older sisters who are absolutely beastly to her, and her father, who is consumed by his work and just shuts himself up in his office all day. And her mother, she never actually knew her mother because she died when Flavia was just like a child. And so this is in Europe, and Flavia really has to fend by herself. Her only friend is sort of the, what would you call it, the person who takes care of their house. His name is Dogger. And Flavia really has to fend by herself because her only friend is Dogger. Her sisters are absolutely beastly to her, and her father, like, won't pay any attention to any of his daughters. So Flavia really has to fend by herself. And she sort of I cannot spit out words today. She sort of has an odd passion for poisons. She's really into poisons and science. I highly recommend this series. It is really a page-turner. They're like murder mysteries in every book. Someone gets murdered, and Flavia finds out who did it, even though the police are always telling Flavia to stay out of it, but Flavia, being Flavia, doesn't. These are such good books. I really love the writing style. Flavia de Luce feels like such a real character and a very witty character as well. These are such good books. I highly recommend them to anyone interested in mystery, who likes the mystery genre, or anyone who's not into mystery like me, who still really enjoyed this book. I highly recommend all of these books. Oh, and the audiobooks are really great as well. The narrator of the audiobooks sounds exactly how I, imagine Flavia to sound like. So I also recommend the audiobooks. Now, if you're wondering, do these books have to be read in order? I would say that no, they don't necessarily have to be read in order, although I would say that you probably should read them in order because there's a lot of stuff that Flavia finds out later on about, her mother and other stuff. I would highly recommend reading them in order. Right, and then I have The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. Now, I'm sure probably 95% of you watching this have read these books, and if you haven't, you need to. C.S. Lewis was, of course, J.R.R. Tolkien's best friend. They really inspired each other. In fact, if you didn't know, the Professor Diggory, who makes the wardrobe in Narnia and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the old professor in the house, C.S. Lewis actually based his character off of J.R.R. Tolkien, which I can definitely see. I wonder, what do they teach at schools these days? So these are 7 books written by C.S. Lewis. And I'm sure you all know the concept of this book. So I recommend these books. And I'm sure probably almost all of you watching this have read these books. And if you haven't, you really need to. These are the books that I remember my parents reading to me when I was very young. And these books are really what sort of started getting me into books and reading before I even knew how to read. I was 4 or 5, maybe even 3. No, yeah, probably 4 or 5 when my parents read these to me. And this is really what got me interested in reading, even when I didn't know how to read very well. So I highly recommend these. And then the next series on this list is by the same author, The Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis. I really love the illustration on this box here. This is a box set that I have. Space Trilogy. I've read these books really recently, and if you have read the Chronicles of Narnia, and if you really like C.S. Lewis's writings, if you're a fan of C.S. Lewis, and you have not read these books, you need to read them. These are one of the greatest books I've ever read. I just discovered them recently, and I enjoyed them so much. Now, mind you, I haven't finished the third book yet. I'm maybe almost a quarter of the way through it, and so far, like, the third book, it isn't as good as the first two, but I would say it's still interesting, and it's definitely getting better. But the first two books on this list, fantastic. In fact, I would say these books are even better than the Narnia books. Not, of course, that the Narnia books are bad, but these books, I think, are even better than the Narnia books. There's just so much thoughtfulness to them. So this consists of 3 books. I can't get these. They're coming out very slowly. Tempted to pound on it with a hammer, but that probably wouldn't be very wise. Oh, they fell out. Okay. I got the books. They're safe, don't worry. So the 3 books in the Space Trilogy are... Let me try that again. The 3 books in the Space Trilogy are Out of the Silent Planet, Paralandra, and That Hideous Strength, which I am currently reading. So this series, we start out with Elwyn Ransom, who is abducted by his former friends on a spaceship and taken to the planet Mars, or as it's known by the inhabitants of it, Malacandra. And Ransom interacts with this alien species on the planet Malacandra, or Mars, and learns their language and ends up becoming friends with them, and learns a lot more about their planet and about the bent aliens, bent creatures as they call them, which are all the evil aliens, if you will. In the second book, he goes to Venus, which is called Paralandra. So Mars is Malacandra, Earth is Thulcandra, and Mars is Paralandra. I found these first 2 books especially to be so fascinating. I can't choose one over the other. They're both so good. This is one of the most... I think this is the most underrated science fiction books of all time. In fact, maybe even the most underrated books of all time. I think everyone needs to read these books. They are so good. My favorite works of C.S. Lewis's. I don't know why I haven't read them before, and you should definitely read these books. The next series is... Ooh, that's heavy. Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. The series consists of 7 books. Whew. I'm sure all of you watching this have heard of the Harry Potter series and at least read them, because they are a very popular book series. I'm sure everyone watching this pretty much knows what these books are. A boy named Harry who's lived a terrible life with his aunt and uncle, and his cousin Dudley, and they all pretty much hate him. He gets really mistreated. And he was adopted by them because his parents were killed by the Dark Lord Voldemort, but when he was just like a baby. But then Voldemort tried to kill him, but he couldn't, and Harry was left with just a lightning scar on his forehead. And then Voldemort, his physical body, ended up getting destroyed, and he currently resides in spirit form. Kind of like Sauron in Lord of the Rings. And the Dementors are basically Ringwraiths, and then there's Dumbledore, who's like Gandalf, and Dobby's like Gollum, except he's good. Anyway, so, Harry Potter. I know there are a lot of people who have, like, heard of this series and just never read it, assuming that it was terrible just because of what they heard about it. And there are a lot of people who do dislike the series, but this is such a good series. I don't know how anyone could not like this. If you have not read this series, I highly recommend them. These were the books that I read way back. So, the Narnia books, as I mentioned earlier, were really what started my love for literature. But this was when I was 7 years old. My mom read to me the first Harry Potter book out loud, and I said, that was really good. That was like one of the best books ever. Can you read me the rest of the series? And Mom was like, maybe you can try reading them for yourself. Well, I took that a little literally, and I ended up reading the entire series in like less than a month when I was just 7 years old, and I just enjoyed them so much. But then after I finished the series, I remember I felt so helpless because I'm like, what am I gonna do? There's nothing to read now. I don't know what to do. And so my dad just took me to the bookshelf and he said, pick out any book you want and try reading it. So I just found The Hobbit sitting on the bookshelf and I read that, loved it, read Lord of the Rings. So this series is really what made me a bookworm, made me become a bookworm when I was just 7 years old. I just enjoyed this so much. I wish I could brainwash myself or just go back in time and read these books again for the first time because I enjoyed them so much. These were really, really what made me become a bookworm. And from that point on, I was reading like crazy. And I love these books so much. There's so many deep themes of friendship, bravery, sacrifice, courage, and all this stuff that I feel like is lost in a lot of modern fantasy books these days. It's a great story of good versus evil with heroic virtue, and I just enjoyed them so much at that original time, and I highly recommend these books. If you haven't read the Harry Potter series, but you've heard about them, and you're unsure if you'll like them, I would say just give them a try, and you'll probably be surprised. Ugh. These books are bricks. Oh! Next is The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I know The Hobbit isn't technically a part of the Lord of the Rings series, but hey, if they're all in a set like this together, then they're all one series, so I'm counting The Hobbit. So, as I mentioned earlier, I just love this set so much. This is the set that I originally got all those years ago when I was 8 years old for my birthday, when I had read The Hobbit, but we didn't own Lord of the Rings, and so my parents got this set for me for my birthday. Oh, those were the good old days, the early years of me being a bookworm. I enjoyed these books so much when I originally read them when I was just 7 or 8 years old. These are such good books. I'm sure all of you watching this have read these books, and if you haven't, you need to. The Hobbit is very good, and I'd say The Lord of the Rings is definitely better than The Hobbit, but The Hobbit is still very, very good as well. These books are all a 10 out of 10. They're all fantastic. As you know, if you've been around this channel for a while, I'm a huge fan of J.R.R. Tolkien, so I'm sure nobody expected this. Nobody expected me to put any Tolkien books on this list at all. Seriously, if you haven't read these books, then the only explanation is that you've been living at the bottom of a coal pit on the other side of the galaxy your entire life. Please, you must read these books. And ever since I read, like, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit when I was 7 years old, I remember wanting to be a hobbit because hobbits basically are exactly how I want to be. I want to live in a quiet place, in a hole in the ground, no machinery, just quiet pastures and forests everywhere, a quiet place. I want to have 7 meals a day. I want to walk barefoot, which I do quite a bit of walking barefoot since I was 7 up till now, even though a lot of people that know me don't understand that, but if hobbits did it, I'll do it. Hobbits basically envision exactly what I wish I could be. I wish I could be a hobbit. I want to share with you the really fascinating story of how J.R.R. Tolkien came up with the idea of hobbits. So it was just one afternoon, and Tolkien was a professor of English literature at Oxford University back in 1930s. So this was 1935, I think, or might have been 1934. And so Tolkien was grading examination papers in the summer, and he said it was very laborious and unfortunately also boring. So Tolkien was a professor. He was getting really bored marking examination papers, and he found that one of the students had left a blank page. And as Tolkien said, marvelous. I would have given him an extra mark for it. So Tolkien found that one of these students had left a blank page. There's nothing to write in it, so Tolkien just scribbled on it, and he said that he couldn't think why. He didn't even know really what he was writing. His pen just moved, and he wrote the words, "In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit." That is what started the idea of hobbits. He said he didn't know where the word hobbit came from. His pen just moved, and that's what came out of it. And so these are such good books. Tolkien spent 17 entire years writing the Lord of the Rings, and it really shows. The world of Middle-earth is really a beautiful world that he has created, and I highly recommend this to anyone who hasn't read them already. Then there's the Green Ember series by S.D. Smith. You've heard me talk about these ones before. There are 4 main books. These 4 novels here that are all about 300, 400 pages. Then S.D. Smith also wrote a bunch of All the Books Are Falling Over, Falling Over, Falling Over. So S.D. Smith also wrote a bunch of little mini Green Ember books. They're all really short books. So these three ones, the Tales of Old Natalia series, they take place thousands of years before the main series. Then there's also The Lost Key, which takes place in between the first and second main large Green Ember books. And there's also Green Ember Archer series, which I love this series, and we follow Joe Shanks, a character whom we know in the main Green Ember series, but these books really flesh him out. We get to see the story from his perspective, we get to know his life story, and these take place in between each of the main Green Ember books. Now, there are 3 books in this series, and yes, I do own the 3rd one, but my brother is borrowing it, so I can't show it to you now. All these books, of course, I met the author once, which I was delighted about. I did a whole video on that once, and he signed all of these books, so all of them are hand-signed, which is so great. I had such fun time meeting him, but that is for that video I made a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago. Yeah, probably more than a month ago. Check that video out if you're interested. But if you haven't read these books, here, I'll just use this first one to represent the books, the entire series. The Green Ember is a bit similar to Redwall, at least in conception, because the Green Ember isn't really that similar to Redwall, besides the fact that it has creatures in it, furry creatures as the main characters, and it does have similar themes, but the story and tone is way different. This story, we open with 2 rabbits named Heather and Pickett, who are siblings, living peacefully in their home in Nick Hollow, but it is all of a sudden interrupted. And Heather and Pickett find out that there are a bunch of wars and conflicts going on in the outside world that they knew nothing about before, and they suddenly find out that they are actually tied into all these wars and conflicts. I don't want to say too much because that might be giving too much away. This is, again, one of those books that I originally read when I was like 8 or 9 years old, when I first became a bookworm. I think this was the series that I read right after finishing Lord of the Rings, and I enjoyed them so much. Now, these books were written very recently. These were all written in the past 10 years. And I feel like so many, fantasy, I feel like nowadays has lost its meaning. Stories these days have lost their meaning. But this book really stays true to the original meaning of stories. Like J.R. Tolkien with Lord of the Rings, there's a reason it's so popular. There's a reason Harry Potter is so popular. Reason Tolkien, Lewis are so popular. It's because their stories actually mean something. So many fantasy writers, and really writers in general nowadays, their stories literally mean nothing. You can tell that S.D. Smith actually put a lot of hard work and effort into this book. These are good Christian books with heroic virtue, all those good themes that Lord of the Rings has. And that is one of the reasons why I love this series so much, is it is a book written very much like a modern book, but with a sort of archaic feeling, and really has the true, deep, original meaning that stories once had. That is why I love the Green Ember series so much. If you haven't read the Green Ember series, you absolutely should. Everyone should. These are my 2nd favorite book series that I've ever read in my entire life. And finally, the very last series on this list, and my absolute favorite series of all time. It's definitely not a series written by J.R.R. Tolkien. The Great Tales of Middle-earth by J.R.R. Tolkien. So I know this is kind of cheating because these aren't technically a series. It's not like, The Great Tales of Middle-earth Book 1, The Great Tales of Middle-earth Book 2. These aren't technically considered a series, but hey, they're in a box set. I'm counting them. These slip out much more easier than the Space Trilogy ones. Ooh, didn't break. No, it didn't break. Good. So this is a series consisting of 3 books: Children of Húrin, Beren and Luthien, and The Fall of Gondolin. Now, these 3 books were the ones that were most important to Tolkien and that he spent most of his life writing. These were the works that were truly very close to Tolkien's heart. These were Tolkien's favorite of the books that he wrote. He spent his entire life writing them, and it really, really shows. These are just such great books. my favorite Tolkien books of all time and my favorite book series of all time. Now, I do like... I have to remind you, this is my favorite series. I do like other book. There are 2 other books that I like more than I like these books. But remember, this is my book series, not book singular. Book series. Which this isn't technically a series, but again, I'm counting it. So, like, Beren and Luthien is such a good story. A very, very profound and meaningful story. One which Tolkien really poured his heart and soul into. And I highly recommend these 3 great tales of Middle-earth to anyone who's read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. You don't really have to be particularly knowledgeable about the Silmarillion or any of that to read and enjoy these books. In fact, I recommend reading these directly after reading The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. It'll sort of ease you into the Silmarillion. These are such great books. The Children of Húrin, Beren and Luthien, and The Fall of Gondolin. These were the works that Tolkien was most passionate about, and it really shows, you guys. It really shows. These are such great books. I think everyone should read them. And if you haven't read them, again, you've been living at the bottom of a coal pit on the other side of the galaxy your entire life. I'm surrounded by a bunch of books. Here, let me show you this in a minute. Yeah, my floor is a complete mess. I'm gonna have to pick all this up after finishing filming this video. Well, thank you so much for watching this video, and for now, farewell.